Welcome, where every episode is an induction into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame, the Raw Report, NWA, and the Ruthless Empire, the Compton Explosion. In the late 1980s, the hip hop world was looking east. New York was the center of everything, dominated by complex metaphors and boom bap rhythms. But 3,000 miles away, in the middle of the heat and the tension of Compton, five men, Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, MC Ren, and DJ Yella, were cooking up a different kind of fire. They weren't trying to outrhyme the poets in the Bronx. They were trying to survive the reality of their own zip code. They didn't call it rap. They called it reality reporting. They staged a total takeover of the American mind. They realized that the frustration of the neighborhood and the heavy funk-fueled grooves of the West Coast were the perfect ingredients for a social blast. They traded the upbeat party vibes for a dark, cinematic look at police brutality, street survival, and the cold truth of the grind. They were the first to prove that you didn't need a radio-friendly hook to become a global phenomenon. They brought a documentary-style intensity to the booth, proving that hip-hop was the most effective tool for telling the stories that the nightly news refused to cover. They were the first voice of a generation that was sick of being ignored. The Ruthless Blueprint. At the center of this storm was Eazy-E and the birth of Ruthless Records. This wasn't just another label. It was an independent powerhouse built on street money and raw ambition. Eazy-E understood something the major labels didn't. The streets wanted the truth, and they wanted it uncut. Along with Jerry Heller, Eazy turned Ruthless into a headquarters for the West Coast sound. It was the house that built NWA, but it was also a launch pad for the DOC, Michelle, and eventually Bone Thugs in Harmony. Ruthless was the proof that you could be small, independent, and still strike fear into the hearts of the corporate giants. Eazy-E wasn't just a rapper. He was a businessman who knew how to market the dangerous image of Compton to the entire world. He took the parental advisory sticker and turned it into a badge of honor. Ruthless Records proved that the West Coast didn't need permission from New York or Los Angeles executives to dominate the charts. They built their own table, set their own rules, and forced the rest of the industry to pay a tax just to be in their presence. The Free Speech War. In 1988, the release of Straight Outta Compton changed the rules of music forever. With the biting analytical pen of Ice Cube and the raw, street-certified charisma of Eazy-E, the album was a masterpiece of sonic aggression. It took the deep grooves of Parliament Funkadelic and smashed them together with a hard-edged attitude that terrified the establishment. Even the FBI had to pay attention. They were the first group to force the United States government to respond to a song, making it clear that the streets had a voice that couldn't be silenced. This wasn't just a win for California. It was a win for the right to speak. It proved that hip-hop had the muscle to challenge the status quo on its own terms. They weren't cleaning up the language for the censors. They were making it louder and more confrontational. They turned "Fuck the Police" into a global anthem of resistance that bridged the gap between the hood and the suburbs. They proved that the group dynamic, multiple voices with distinct personalities, was a devastatingly effective way to command a record. They set the standard for what defiance looked like, proving that the truth was the ultimate asset. The rise of the moguls. Most groups would have folded under that kind of pressure, but NWA proved that a hip hop artist could grow into a global force. After the initial explosion, the individual members went on to build empires that redefined the entire entertainment industry. Ice Cube moved from the most feared writer in the country into a Hollywood powerhouse, showing that the street narrative belonged on the silver screen. Dr. Dre moved from the turntables to the boardroom, becoming the primary mind behind the modern sound and the first to turn audio gear into a global luxury brand. They proved that you could grow up within the culture without losing your soul. They transitioned from the rowdy teenagers of the 80s into the executive producers and filmmakers of the next century, proving that being an MC could lead to absolute economic power. They used their platform to fight for ownership and creative control, proving that hip hop wasn't just a phase, it was a path toward independence. They paved the way for every mogul who followed, proving that you didn't have to fit into a corporate box to own the building. They showed the world that a kid from Compton could end up running the whole show. The induction of the rebels. We are bringing NWA into the Hall of Fame, not just for the records they sold, but for the walls they tore down. They were the first to prove that hip-hop was a universal language of rebellion that could absorb the pain of the streets and turn it into a global movement. They brought a level of fearlessness to the game that pushed every other artist to speak their truth without looking back. For the album that put the West Coast on the map, for the label that gave the streets a bank account, and for being the first to show us that a voice from the block could reach the highest levels of power. We officially welcome the world's most dangerous group and the ruthless empire, the Kings of Compton, NWA, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. The Cold Chronicler, Ice-T, the Newark to Los Angeles pipeline. Before he was the face of the West Coast's lyrical movement, Tracy Morrow was a kid navigating the complexities of Newark and the streets of Los Angeles. He didn't come into the game trying to be a poet. He came in as a hustler with a microphone, while the rest of the world was looking at hip-hop as a fun, rhythmic escape. Ice-T was busy treating it like a field report from the front lines. He wasn't just rapping. He was documenting a lifestyle that the mainstream media was too afraid to look at. He brought a cold, calculated perspective to the booth that made the rest of the industry realize that the gangsta narrative wasn't just a story. It was a reality. He was the first to give the streets of Los Angeles a voice that carried the weight of experience. He didn't just talk about the hood, he analyzed it. He brought the player and pimp aesthetics from the pages of Iceberg Slim and poured them into the mold of a new culture. He was the first to prove that you could be a storyteller with a criminal background and still command the respect of the world. He brought a rhyme pays energy to the table, showing everyone that the streets had a vocabulary and a code that deserved to be heard. He wasn't just a rapper, he was the first narrator of the urban underworld, the birth of the gangsta narrative. In 1987, when Rhyme Pays hit the speakers, the rules of what was acceptable in a hip-hop record were rewritten. With the heavy booming tracks and Ice-T's steady rhythmic delivery, he introduced the world to the OG mindset. He wasn't chasing the party crowd. He was making music for the people who lived the life he described. Records like 6 in the Morning, became the definitive blueprints for everything that would eventually be called gangsta rap. He proved that a single song could have the cinematic power of a feature film. This wasn't just music, it was a cultural shift. It proved that hip hop had the grit to tackle the darkest corners of the American dream. He wasn't cleaning up the language for the censors. He was making it more honest and more dangerous. He turned the parental advisory sticker into a badge of authenticity. He proved that the solo MC could carry the weight of an entire neighborhood's struggle on his shoulders. He set the standard for what street reporting looked like, proving that the truth was more valuable than any radio-friendly hook. The power of the multimedia mogul. Most artists would have been satisfied with being a rap legend, but Ice-T proved that a hip-hop mind could dominate any medium it touched. He was the first to truly bridge the gap between the microphone and the silver screen. From his role in New Jack City to his decades-long run on Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, he showed the world that a kid from the streets could become a household name without losing his edge. He proved that the hustle was a skill set that worked just as well in a Hollywood trailer as it did in a Queensbridge or South Central recording studio. He proved that you could grow up within the culture and still be the most respected man in the room. He transitioned from the controversial artist behind Cop Killer into a respected actor, author, and cultural commentator. He used his platform to advocate for artist rights and creative freedom, proving that hip-hop wasn't a phase. It was a foundation for a life of absolute independence. He paved the way for every rapper who ever dreamed of being an actor, proving that you didn't have to change your voice to win an Emmy. He showed the world that a legend isn't defined by how he starts, but by how he maintains his position at the top. The spirit of the OG. When we look at the landscape of the culture today, Ice-T's influence is in the DNA of every artist who values game over gimmicks. We see his storytelling in the cinematic albums of the 90s. We see his professionalism in the moguls of today. And we see his fearlessness in every artist who refuses to be silenced by the establishment. He gave the culture its backbone. He reminded us that the MC is a voice for the voiceless and a witness to the times. He was the big brother who showed everyone how to handle the business, how to speak your mind, and how to survive in an industry that was often designed to chew you up. He proved that you could be the most cold-blooded man on the mic and still be the most intelligent man in the building. He didn't just give us hits, he gave us a manual for longevity that we still use to measure greatness today. He was the ultimate hybrid of street logic and professional excellence. He was the man who taught us that rhyme pays if you have the heart to tell the truth. The induction. We are bringing Ice-T into the Hall of Fame because he is the original source of the street narrative. He was the man who turned the microphone into a mirror for the reality of the streets and a window for the rest of the world to see through. For the stories that redefined the science of the street, for the career that set the world on fire, and for being the original godfather of the West Coast sound, we officially welcome the OG himself, the legendary Ice-T, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. Too Short, the godfather of the Bay, the Oakland philosophy in the early 1980s, while the rest of the world was looking at New York for the next big thing. Todd Shaw was busy building an empire from the trunk of a car in Oakland. He didn't come into the game trying to be a complex poet or a flashy pop star. He became too short, and he introduced a style of rap that was built on the slow, heavy funk of the West Coast and the raw, uncut reality of the street hustle. He didn't need a major label to tell him he was a star. He had the streets of East Oakland to validate every word he said. He was the first to prove that you could build a massive independent career without ever seeking permission from the industry gatekeepers. He brought the pimp aesthetic in the game to the microphone with a level of clarity that the culture had never seen. He wasn't just rapping, he was giving a masterclass in the philosophy of the hustle. He traded the fast-paced delivery of the era for a slow, rhythmic, and incredibly deliberate flow that allowed every word to land with the weight of a sledgehammer. He was the first to prove that you could be a storyteller with a dirty mouth and a clean business mind. He brought a don't fight the feeling energy to the table, showing everyone that the Bay Area had its own vocabulary, its own rhythm, and its own rules. He wasn't just an MC, he was the first narrator of the Oakland underworld. The birth of the independent hustle. In 1987, when Born to Mac hit the pavement, the rules of the music business were rewritten by a man who refused to play by them. With the heavy booming bass lines and the stripped down, funky production, Too Short introduced the world to the independent mogul mindset. He wasn't chasing the radio or looking for a music video budget. He was selling tapes directly to the people who lived the life he was describing. Records like The Ghetto and Freaky Tales became the definitive blueprints for the West Coast sound. He proved that a single artist could command the loyalty of an entire region by simply staying true to the soil. This wasn't just about the music. It was a total shift in how the business worked. He proved that hip hop had the power to bypass the traditional system and go straight to the source. He wasn't cleaning up his lyrics for the censors. He was making them more honest, more raunchy, and more reflective of the world he saw every day. He turned the explicit lyrics tag into his strongest marketing tool. He proved that a solo artist could carry the weight of an entire city's identity on his back. He set the standard for what a regional king looked like, proving that being a legend in your own backyard was the most powerful foundation you could have. The power of longevity. Most artists are lucky to have a 3-year run, but Too Short proved that a hip-hop career could last for decades. He was the first to master the art of the re-up, from the 80s to the 90s, and all the way into the modern era. He showed the world that a rapper could stay relevant by never trying to be anyone but himself. He proved that the game was a skill set that never went out of style. Whether he was rocking a solo track or collaborating with the biggest names in the industry, he always stayed in his lane and kept his foot on the gas. He proved that you could grow up within the culture and still be the coolest man in the room. He transitioned from the young hustler selling tapes in the town into a global icon who is respected by every generation of the culture. He used his platform to advocate for independence and financial literacy, proving that hip-hop wasn't just a young man's game. It was a life path for those who knew how to play their cards right. He paved the way for every independent artist who ever sold a CD out of their trunk or started their own label, proving that you didn't have to change your story to win the marathon. He showed the world that a legend isn't defined by a flash in the pan, but by the ability to stay on the block and keep the money coming in. The spirit of the town. When we look at the landscape of the culture today, Too Short's influence is in the DNA of every artist who values game and independence. We see his slow-rolling influence in the G-Funk era. We see his business model in every DIY artist today. And we see his total fearlessness in every rapper who refuses to be told what they can and can't say. He gave the culture its backbone and its sense of self-reliance. He reminded us that the MC is a representative of the community and a protector of the local sound. He was the big brother who showed everyone how to handle the business, how to keep it funky, and how to survive in an industry that was always looking for the next trend. He proved that you could be the most short funk man on the mic and still be the most respected man in the building. He didn't just give us hits, he gave us a manual for survival and a master class in staying true to your roots. He was the ultimate hybrid of street logic and independent excellence. He was the man who taught us that the rhyme pays best when you own the whole company. The induction. We are bringing Too Short into the Hall of Fame because he is the original source of the independent spirit. He was the man who turned the trunk of his car into a storefront and his neighborhood into a global brand. For the stories that redefined the science of the hustle, for the career that has outlasted every trend, and for being the original godfather of the Oakland sound, we officially welcome the man who has been born to Mac from day one, the legendary Too Short, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. The ambassador of the Bay, E40, the Vallejo vocabulary. In the late 1980s and early 90s, the rap world was finally starting to look toward the West Coast, but most people were only focused on the sounds coming out of Los Angeles. But up in the hillside of Vallejo, a man named Earl Stevens was busy constructing a completely different universe. He didn't come into the game trying to sound like New York or even like his neighbors in Oakland. He became E40, and he introduced a style of rap that was built on a foundation of independent grit and a vocabulary that was so deep and original, it felt like he was speaking a secret language. He didn't just join the game, he gave the world a new way to speak it. He was the first to prove that you could be a lyrical innovator and a street mogul without ever compromising your regional identity. He brought a mob music aesthetic to the microphone that was thick with game and heavy on the bass. He traded the standard delivery of the era for a slanguage that was fast, rhythmic, and incredibly creative, coining terms that would eventually become global staples. He proved that the Bay Area had a culture that was entirely its own, a mix of high-stakes hustling and a sharp, witty intelligence. He wasn't just another rapper. He was the first narrator of the Vallejo experience, a man who treated every verse like a business proposal and every song like a manual for the hustle. The sick-witted blueprint. In the early 90s, when the industry was still obsessed with major label gatekeepers, E40 and his family were busy building an independent empire from the ground up. With the birth of Sick-Witted Records, he proved that you didn't need a corporate office in Manhattan to dominate the charts. Alongside the Click, Be Legit, D-Shot, and Sugar T, he introduced the world to a family-first business model that relied on local loyalty and absolute independence. He wasn't chasing the radio. He was selling tapes directly to the people who were living the life he was describing. This wasn't just about the music. It was a masterclass in economic sovereignty. He proved that hip hop had the power to bypass the traditional system and go straight to the source. He wasn't cleaning up his lyrics for the mainstream. He was making them more authentic, more complex, and more reflective of the world he saw in the Magazine Street area. He turned the independent hustle into a badge of honor, selling hundreds of thousands of units before he ever signed a major distribution deal. He set the standard for what a regional king looked like, proving that if you owned the masters and the distribution, you owned the future. He showed the entire world that a kid from Vallejo could build a table big enough to feed his whole neighborhood. The power of the innovator. Most artists are defined by a single era, but E40 proved that a hip hop career could be a lifelong journey of constant reinvention. From the mob music of the 90s to the Hiip movement of the 2000s, he showed the world that he could adapt to any sound while still maintaining his signature water flow. He was the one who proved that a rapper could stay relevant by being a constant student of the game and a pioneer of new sounds. Whether he was rocking a solo track or collaborating with the biggest names in the industry, he always brought a level of sprinkle that no one else could match. He proved that you could grow up within the culture and still be the most innovative man in the building. He transitioned from the young hustler selling tapes out of his trunk into a global icon and a diversified businessman with interests in everything from spirits to food. He used his platform to advocate for financial literacy and entrepreneurship, proving that hip hop wasn't just a young man's game. It was a foundation for a diversified empire. He paved the way for every independent artist who ever dreamed of owning their own brand, proving that you didn't have to change your story or your sound to win the long-distance race. He showed the world that a legend isn't defined by a single hit, but by the ability to keep the game fresh for over 3 decades. The spirit of the hillside. When we look at the landscape of the culture today, E40's influence is in the DNA of every artist who values creativity and independence. We see his slanguage in the way the world speaks today. We see his business model in every DIY artist who manages their own career. And we see his total fearlessness in every rapper who refuses to be told how to flow. He gave the culture its sense of originality and its self-reliant backbone. He reminded us that the MC is a representative of the soil and a protector of the independent spirit. He was the big brother who showed everyone how to handle the business, how to stay savage, and how to survive in an industry that was always looking for the next trend. He proved that you could be the most Charlie Hustle man on the mic and still be the most respected businessman in the room. He didn't just give us hits, he gave us a vocabulary for life and a blueprint for generational wealth. He was the ultimate hybrid of street wisdom and professional excellence. He was the man who taught us that the rhyme pays best when you stay independent and keep your game on 1,000. The induction. We are bringing E40 into the Hall of Fame because he is the original source of the independent Bay Area spirit. He was the man who turned a local slang into a global language and a family business into a worldwide empire. For the vocabulary that redefined the science of the flow, for the career that has outlasted every trend, and for being the original ambassador of the Bay Area sound. We officially welcome the man who has been Ghetto Report Card certified from day one, the legendary E40, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame.